Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar about furloughing. I'm Alan Stokes, one of the policy leads at SFHA. To take us through the key points to think about, we're delighted to be joined by Marianne McJannett from TC Young. Now, I'm sure you'll all have plenty of questions, and Zoom has facility to type these in as they occur to you. If you just click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, you can type in your question and we can put it to Marianne. An SFHA briefing note on furloughing will be released following this webinar, hopefully before the end of the week, in order to capture some of the key points. And with that, I'll hand you over to Marianne.
Hi there everyone, thank you for joining on today. I'm just going to set up my slides for you. Thanks for the introduction, Alan. As many of you might know, I'm Marianne McJannett and I am one of the associates in the employment team at TC Young. I've been quite heavily involved recently, as you can imagine, in dealing with furloughing and advising various clients on how to furlough, when to furlough, why to furlough. So I want to look at this specifically from the RSL sector, obviously, today, and to try and answer as many questions as I possibly can for you. Obviously, I can't give specific legal advice on a webinar. I can take you through the background to furloughing and the job retention scheme, and I can try and answer questions in as I possibly can. But if you do have any specific advice that you do have, then feel free to get in touch with me afterwards. So the presentation is furloughing employees, what, why, who, and what, when, who, and why. I want to cover today the background of the coronavirus job retention scheme and furloughing, looking at the practicalities when furloughing, considering what, if any, are your regulatory implications for choosing or deciding to furlough staff, and looking at a question of when furloughing might be most appropriate. And hopefully that will answer certainly a lot of the questions that you have, but if you have any, then just ask as we go through. So the coronavirus job retention scheme, which I'll just call the scheme, was announced by the Chancellor as a means to avoid job losses as a result of COVID-19. The implication of the coronavirus, as you will all be aware, has been absolutely huge, and when this was announced, I think it was on the 20th of March, so a month ago, the Chancellor announced that this would be a way to try and stop any job losses as a result of the coronavirus. Now, employers can apply to the scheme for a grant that covers 80% of an employee's salary, up to a maximum of £2,500. The employee had to be on the payroll as of the 19th of March in order to be eligible. Until Friday of last week, an employee would only be eligible if they were on the payroll as at the 28th of February, but that has been extended to the 19th of March in order to capture a number of employees who had just started jobs. So a lot of seasonal workers for a lot of companies had started in the beginning, the first weeks of March, and they weren't eligible. So the government have extended it to cover people who were on the payroll as at the 19th of March. Again, this was initially going to be in place until the 31st of May, and it has now been extended to the 30th of June. I would be surprised if it is extended beyond that, mainly because there's not a limitless pocket of cash available to the government in order to support employers, but that is certainly, so it's certainly for 4 months to the 30th of June. An employee must be furloughed for a minimum of 3 weeks. Furloughing is a term that many people said, well, I've never heard of it. Neither had I at the point at which the job scheme was announced. It was not a word that was used in employment terms at all. It's an American word, and actually I think it's quite an American army word, but it basically means to put on leave. So along with a new word of furloughing, employees can also be defurloughed. So you can take them off furlough and then they can be refurloughed. You can put them back on furlough as long as each furlough period is for 3 weeks or more. So employees can be taken on and off furlough, but each period has to be for a minimum of 3 weeks. Initially, when this job retention scheme was proposed, it was put in place in order to prevent job losses. So an employee who would have otherwise been made redundant would be eligible. This has now been extended to those who are affected or might be affected by the coronavirus. This then could extend to employees who are now having to work at home whilst caring for a child because of schools closing or nurseries closing, and you might say, well, actually, instead of saying to that member of staff, we're going to put you on unpaid leave and you get nothing, that employee has been affected by the coronavirus, and therefore the government is saying they can be furloughed. Similarly, if someone is shielding, they might not have been entitled to pay, but now with the job retention scheme, they can be furloughed. The job retention scheme and the grant that is available is up to 80% of an employee's salary, up to £2,500. An employer can top up, so take an employee's salary up to the full 100%, so the 80% from the retention scheme plus the 20% that they contribute, but there's no requirement for an employer to do so. I have not heard of many employees. I had one who contacted me looking for advice saying, oh, I just think it's a bit unfair that they're not giving me my full salary, they're not topping it up. But if the reality is that, well, you're getting 80% of your salary, or you're getting no salary, or you're losing your job, you're not going to get many employees who disagree with the options that are available to them. An employee who has left their job, so we've seen quite a lot in the situation, and you might in the news about employees who had handed in their notice, had left their employer on the 2nd of March. Their new job wasn't, they'd left their job in this case, would be say on the 21st of March, but the new job wasn't then taking them, and they can then be rehired. They weren't eligible for being furloughed, and that is also why the eligibility has also been extended as well. So an employee who has left the job can be rehired and then put on furlough. There's then some kind of ambiguity around that about continuous employment and what agreement you would have in place for the employee to leave, or once the furlough period has ended. So that's something that you would want to look at specifically if it applies to you at all. The key thing is that an employee cannot carry out work for their employer, whilst they are furloughed. The updated guidance that was issued last week states that this must be in writing between the employer and the employee. So that's the Treasury guidance. We were previously going on a direction that had come out, and there's then some ambiguity around whether or not someone who had said you're now furloughed and they don't have something in writing confirming from their employee that they are happy to be furloughed, does that then make them not eligible for the scheme? In situations with RSLs, I think it would be very unlikely that you would not have a paper trail of you changing someone's terms and conditions to make them a furloughed employee, and then having that in writing and an agreement. So you need to have that. I wouldn't be advising any client to furlough a member of staff without having it in writing and because it's a change to their terms and conditions. But what they are now saying is that you need to have it specifically in writing that they won't carry out work. You can.
Hi, Marianne.
Oh, hi.
Sorry to interrupt. We've had a few questions.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah, if I can just run through them just now, would that be all right? Or do you prefer to wait to the end?
Absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. Well, one of them's a question that you just touched on. If furloughed, can an employee carry out work for another employee another employer whilst on furlough?
Yep, you just beat me to it. It was coming up on my next slide. So an employee can, but they need to have either a clause within their existing contract of employment that says you can work elsewhere whilst on furlough, or you need to get agreement from your employee. So the employee would need to get agreement from their employer that they could undertake work elsewhere. The reality of that is that an employee who is furloughed might end up better off than they would have had they continued working. But as I'll come to, you remain their employer. So if you turn around to them and say, we need you to come back to work tomorrow, or we need to, you know, on Tuesday, you notify someone on Tuesday that their furlough is coming to an end and they're back at work on Monday, they can't then turn around and say, oh, well, actually, I've got my hours at Tesco that I'm doing, for example. So if they are taking on another job whilst on furlough, then you want to kind of really look at the agreement between you and the employee around that.
Okay, thanks for that, Marianne. There's two other questions if you want me to just run through these now. Can you cover what can and can't be considered as training for a furloughed worker? A previous speaker, the person's heard talk, had said that thinking time might be okay or something like that.
I'm not quite sure what thinking time is.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one myself.
I'm not sure if it's thinking about certain things. I don't know. In terms of what I would think is acceptable training is training that they would normally do as part of their role, or updates that are required. So if there are SFHA updates for certain, you know, gas safety checks, and you've got a person who's normally responsible for that is furloughed, it might be that you say, well, actually, there's a webinar that you might want to consider attending, and that would be furlough. What you then couldn't expect, that would be training, sorry, what you then couldn't expect is, now you've gone in that webinar and I want you to do work that we can issue to our tenants, for example, on the back of that. So that's where I think you would kind of get a bit of complication with it.
Okay, thanks for that. The next question was, if an employee accepts a period of furlough initially on a topped up salary and the association wishes to reduce this to 80% only, does this need a new signed permission to be provided?
I think so, and the reason I say that is I had a situation with a client the other week, not an RSL, mind you, but it doesn't really matter, is that they had initially put their staff on furlough and they were topping it up to 80% and they wanted to reduce it. Now, putting someone on furlough is a change to their terms and conditions. You are making them a furloughed employee. So they are being furloughed on this agreed term, which is, we're getting 80% of your salary from the government and we'll top you up. So you're not going to lose out. If you are then changing that to say, actually, we're reducing your salary and you're only going to get the 80% that we are able to get from the government, I think it's probably the best situation to get a new signed agreement to do that. So it's an update to, you know, the furlough, your furloughed employee status that we issued you on the 10th of April. And the situation has now changed. We are not able to sustain the top up, and therefore you will be remain a furloughed employee, but at this rate. I think it's the best situation to have the paper trail that shows, and for your records to show this is what someone was earning at this point, and this is what they're now earning.
Great, thanks, Marianne. We've had another couple of questions, but maybe we can save them to the end, or
no. Well, what I can do is I can go through the next few slides and see if that maybe answers some of the questions, and then I've got loads of time for questions at the end.
Perfect. Thanks, Marianne.
Okay, no problem. Now let me see if I can get back to my screen. So the thing about the job retention scheme is that there's a clear expectation that employers who receive public funding for staff costs won't furlough the staff if they have received public money for that role. Our advice is that RSL can furlough staff, but any role that receives a specific funding, for example, via big lottery, will have to look at it on an individual basis. If you receive or you have an apprentice and that is part or wholly funded by an external body, then you may wish to say, well, actually, there's no work for someone to do now. An apprentice can be furloughed. They might have training that they can do whilst on furlough, but we can't sustain that role for them, so we are going to furlough them. If you're going to do that, and in the case of, say, the big lottery, you might just want, I would suggest that you speak to them and give the reasons why. So if you've got someone who has a role that is wholly community-based and they're unable to carry that out for the time for a short period, then you might look at furloughing. join them. So what I said earlier, if the contract of employment allows for it, then a furloughed employee can take on another job while on furlough. So but you want to look at your specifics within your contract. So the way that I have approached this for clients where a member of staff who is furloughed has asked, they want to get a delivery job, for example, just to kind of pop up their 20% if they're not getting their full salary, is to say, yes, but you can only do the hours that you might be able to do where you're working. So you can't do that job 9 to 5 because you would be working for us, and you need to ensure that any notice that they have to give to their new employer doesn't impact them and their ability to carry out their job for you. They're still an employee, so they still have to report to you. They still can't do anything that competes with you. They can't do anything that brings their employment into disrepute. So you want to kind of look at the circumstances specifically in relation to that one. So and that's just the kind of background of the situation. I've not covered absolutely everything with it. I've tried to cover as many of the headline points with it. Furloughing staff is not going to be an easy decision. It's not an easy decision for any employer to take. But as I said earlier, if you've got an employee who's presented with, we're going to put you on furlough, or you're going to lose your job, you can't know which one an employee is going to take. Communicate with your staff. So I think it's best that the first that they hear of this is not when they are simply notified that they are being furloughed. So communicate with staff as, you know, you're looking at the requirements of the organisation just now. You're considering all options, including any financial implications that the current pandemic is having on the association, and you are taking appropriate steps. In terms of who, and I'll come on to that a bit more, you need to determine what service is needed, what is a critical service for you. And if all services are critical and you're needing to reduce overhead and costs, you then say, well, do we need 2 people doing that just now? Do we need 3 people in our housing management team? You know, do we need 10 people in our rent arrears department? No, you might not. You might need 1 person, and then you're looking at furloughing other members of staff. How you choose who that member of staff is a really difficult one, and that's something that you need to look at a case-by-case basis, and I'll come on to it a little bit. In terms of practicalities, as I say, it's a change to someone's terms and conditions, so they are moving from being fixed-term employee, permanent employee, to being a furloughed employee. That's a change of status, so you need to communicate that with them. You need to say to them that they will become a furloughed employee and that they are not going to carry out work during this period of furlough, that they will be on for a minimum of 3 weeks, and you get them to agree in writing. You keep a record of everything that has been agreed with them. The job retention scheme opened yesterday. So I think I read on the news this morning that 166,000 employers accessed the scheme for looking for government grants. The Chancellor and the Treasury have said that all these employers will be eligible. I'm sure they will be going through it with a fine-tooth comb to see if there's any employees that they are submitting claims for that aren't eligible. But the guidance, I've just put up the quite long link to the step-by-step guide that has been produced by the Treasury, showing actually how you do that. So how you, once you've determined that you've got an employee who's furloughed, how do you actually submit that information in order to claim the grant for them. One thing that we've been thinking about, and I'm sure you've been thinking about as well, is the position of furloughing staff and how this kind of correlates with your regulatory requirements and your obligations to report to the regulator. My advice would be to keep the regulator informed. I don't believe it's a specific notifiable event, but again, it's good to keep the lines of communication open. The regulator, I don't think, will make it a notifiable event. The only situation that may arise is if it's affecting senior members of staff, but even then, it's a temporary situation. And I think if you're informing the regulator that you're taking steps to furlough staff rather than specifically notifying them, then I think that will cover all bases. Ultimately, the regulator are quite keen to say that they don't get involved in specific employment issues, so it is a decision for the individual association to make a decision as to why and who they have decided to furlough. You want to keep updates keep them updated, with regards to the roles, who's been furloughed, the length of time, and any impact this might have on service delivery. Just check to see if any questions kind of pop up. I'm just going to, I'll come back to these ones, those questions that have been asked. So when is it appropriate to furlough staff? Well, the point is that no two organisations will be the same, but this is something that is affecting all organisations. I think it is a time when we need to work together and information share, obviously bearing in mind and keeping abreast of GDPR issues. You know, you're not saying who you're specifically who you might be furloughing, but share off each other of practicalities of how people have gone about it. Take advice, take advice from ourselves, from SFHA obviously. Determine your essential services. What is it that you need in order to be able to run a service for your tenants? And look at employee individual circumstances. So you might have a team of 3, and you say, well, actually, we only need 2 people to carry that out now. Look at what the individual employee circumstances are. If you've got an employee who is working full time at home with 2 children who are not in school at this moment in time, they might actually be delighted to be furloughed at 80% of their salary in order for them to say, I can step back, it's one less thing for me to do. So look at individual employee circumstances when you're considering if that's appropriate. There is no specific who in terms of who can be furloughed, who should be furloughed. It is really up to your own individual organisation. You may say someone isn't furloughed just now, but you may in a couple of weeks say actually we don't need that person, and then you're looking at furloughing them further down the line. And that's fine to do so. You don't need to make a decision on everyone being furloughed as of X date. If you do, then that's quite clean for you, but it's not a necessity. And you can say to some of your staff, you're furloughed for a period of at least 3 weeks from today, and then look at your service delivery and requirements in the coming weeks or month, really to take someone up to the end of June period. That's really all I kind of wanted to go through. I did want to give some time for questions. Alan, I see that there are a few if we want to go through that, and if anyone else has got any other questions.
Great, thanks, Marianne. There are quite a few here. I'll just go through them in order. That's okay. Firstly, we've got one in the chat. Within the RSL sector, a lot of the roles being furloughed are not because of any potential to lose their jobs or be made redundant, but because they've limited to no work to do in the meantime. I just wanted to make sure that there's no issues with doing it for this specific purpose only.
No, and that job would be redundant, because if someone has no work to do, the role is redundant. Now, the work will come back, so it's temporary, but then I would say that that individual would be eligible. So but as long as you're furloughing them for 3 weeks, as long as you're saying, well, actually for 3 weeks we are seeing that that person wouldn't be able to do their job, then they would be eligible. Yeah.
Okay. In the example here, there's someone who's employed who commenced employment on the 26th of February.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't lodged until after the 19th of March, and they've been told therefore cannot be furloughed. So it's just if is there anything around that might be able to be done? I suppose it's the timing of the actual person being employed might mean that they can't therefore have access to the furloughing scheme.
Well, my understanding and from the Treasury guidance is that as long as they are on your payroll as of the 19th of March, then they would be eligible for furlough. I would need to kind of look at that specific circumstance in order to kind of give a fuller answer. But my understanding is that they would be eligible. So I'm not sure, unless that person's maybe got more of a
Yeah, no, it does sound
on
like
it.
it does sound like there might be a way of appealing that, because it does sound like as long as it was the 26th of February that the person was employed. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, okay. If you furlough a member of staff, can you ask other member of staff to cover part or all of their work?
Yes, you can. If you're saying you've got two people carrying out the same role and you only need one of them because there's not enough work for the two of them to do, then the reality is that someone will pick up that work. So yeah, it will be a bit of a change. It's a bit unfair, but that is just the way of it, I think.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Staff furloughed accrue public holidays if they occur during the period of furlough. Effectively seems to be cases where no work for people so being furloughed, but those that are still working are being advised to still take holidays originally applied for. So is that potentially unfair or unreasonable?
So I think the issue with holidays is one that I think is where we'll see the kind of most contentious issues around all this. The point I think that's being made is that staff who are furloughed and not doing any work are accruing their holidays, and they should be entitled to, and any holidays that they are accruing or that they are being asked to take. So you can ask employees to take annual leave whilst they're on furlough. Any holidays that they are taking during that furlough period should be paid at their full salary. So if you're only paying them at 80%, that needs to be topped up for the annual leave days. With your staff who are left behind, who are still not left behind, that's a bit unfair, but who are still working, who haven't been furloughed, I think you need to look at it at a case-by-case basis. I think insisting that staff take their 2 weeks that they had originally booked to go to Mallorca. I keep saying Mallorca in all these webinars because I was due to go there on Friday and I'm devastated. But if you're saying to staff, you still need to take that annual leave, you're entitled to do that. But if you say, actually, we don't need you to take it just now, but we're not allowing you to carry it over completely, we want you to take, say, 3 days this week and 3 days next week, and split it that way. Someone might not want to actually take it. But there's going to be people who are upset, there's people who are going to have their noses put out of joint. But actually the reality of saying to staff who are furloughed that they need to take annual leave as part of that furlough period might limit the issues you have when all your staff come back to the office and you're not dealing with an influx of holiday requests for every member of staff who hasn't wanted to take a holiday because they've not been able to leave the country. You might then say, well, actually, our staff that are furloughed have already used their accrued annual leave, and we only really need to deal with the staff who are left working in the office.
Okay, thanks for that, Marianne. We've got a point here that links back to one of the previous questions around the cut-off date, and it was just that if the RTI is not submitted before the cut-off date, what this person's been told is that it won't be allowed regardless of the date of employment.
I saw something actually on Twitter about that, and I think that is going to be challenged, and I think should be challenged. I think an employee shouldn't be disadvantaged because of something that an employer has done. And I think in that situation, you might say, well, we can't furlough you, but we might need to keep paying you, because I think they are quite open to challenge. Now, in terms of a tribunal claim, I'm not quite sure what that could be, but I think you could have there'll be judicial reviews about all of these situations anyway, I think.
Great, thanks.
I see a question there of, can periods of furloughs be rotated as long as the 3-week minimum is applied? Absolutely. So you can say to members of your team, Marianne, you're furloughed for 3 weeks, and then you'll come back, and then Alan, you'll be 3 weeks, and you come back, and then Karen, you can rotate it, and that's quite common with the number of employers that I've dealt with.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so next question is what happens if an employee is furloughed and becomes ill? Contractual sick pay is in operation and SSP is not claimed. Do they remain furloughed, and would the employer have to top up to 100%?
They would need to, you can't claim from the scheme for SSP, so you can't claim for that to cover it. So if someone is sick and passed on furlough, then they would either need to be topped up, but you can't then claim the SSP back from it, and they would be eligible for SSP, and a lot of employers use the SSP and then top it up so that someone's got their full salary. But what if you're entitled, if your contractual sick pay is that you're entitled to full pay for a period, then that individual would be entitled to that. You then get into the technicalities around of, well, if they get ill 2.5 weeks into furlough and they're taken off furlough, then the 2.5 weeks previous doesn't then count as furlough, and they should be paid their full salary for that, and that's then quite tricky to manage. But any employee who is sick should be receiving sick pay in line with the contract.
Thanks, Marianne.
The question I think that we're getting quite a bit is about the salary sacrifice, and at what point should, in terms of pension, at what point what do you calculate, and what is the grant based on? The grant is based on the salary after the sacrifice, but, and I spoke to a client who has been dealing with it this way, it can be done on the salary before the pension sacrifice, but you would need to have specific agreement with your member of staff about that, and I'm then not sure about the specific pension issues about that, and whether you're then saying we're not contributing to your pension for this period. That's something you would want to specifically speak to the pension.
Great, thanks. There was a question, another question about annual leave. It's just maybe you could talk a bit more about how it's affected and accrued during the furlough period. It's accrued in the normal way. So your annual leave in the same way that it would at any other point, in the same way that it would accrue in relation to any sick pay, any sick period, sorry. It's just accruing that way. So that person is still an employee. They're still entitled to all the terms and conditions. They are just a furloughed employee and are not having to carry out any sort of work. But whilst you've got your furloughing a member of staff for 3 weeks, a month, 2 months potentially, they are accruing their annual leave in that period, so they're not losing out on any annual leave as a result of being furloughed, but you can ask them to take annual leave during that furlough period. Great, thanks. I think you've covered this next one. This was the one about backdating a furlough period where the employee has been shielding and is unable to work from home. Yeah, I don't think so. I think as long as you have, and that the employee has not been carrying out any work for you, so if they are not able to work from home and are shielding, then yeah, they would be eligible. You would then just want to have something in writing that says that they are furloughed as of the 1st of March, for example, and that they have not, nor will they carry out any work on behalf of the employer. The situation that's a bit more tricky is where you've got staff who've been working at home, who've all been working at home now for 4 or 5 weeks, and you're turning around now and saying, well, actually, they've not really been doing anything, or they've not been doing much. We want to furlough them and we want to backdate it to the 27th of March, for example. You then would need, again, get agreement that they've not carried out any work, or they won't carry out any work. But I think that's probably more open to challenge by the Treasury. If you've had someone who for the last month has been working and you could call on them to do something, or they have done certain things, you know, from while they've been working at home, then they wouldn't be eligible. Thanks for that. And the next example is a member of staff who is the main carer looking after her mother, and it's just wanting to make sure that they'd be eligible to be furloughed.
Yeah, they would, because in normal circumstances, that person might have to take time off to care for a dependent, and that elderly mother would be their dependent. So it's similar to someone having to take time off to look after children because the school's closed. In those circumstances, if someone is going to sit and say, well, you're not getting any pay or you're getting 80% pay, I think it's best to furlough that member of staff.
Great, thanks. In the next example, there's an employee whose fixed term contract came to an end at the end of March and they left, but they've now come back to ask if we can reinstate them for furlough because they were unable to start with a new employer due to the virus. Do we have a legal does the person have a legal responsibility to do this?
No.
No.
No. The fixed term contract came to an end. It didn't come to an end as a result of the coronavirus. It came to an end because it was the natural end date of that relationship. A lot of you, I'm sure, will have seen Martin Lewis made a big thing about, rehiring staff, and you can do it. Employers can do it. There's a moral position for doing so, but there is no obligation to do so. And particularly in a case of a fixed term contract, it came to an end as a result. It didn't come to an end, sorry, as a result of the coronavirus. So that person was not impacted by the coronavirus. It's an unfortunate situation, but that's the way of it. There are going to be winners and losers, as there are in any situation, unfortunately.
Thanks for that. In the next example, they've furloughed staff and have committed to top up salary to 100%. Many of their staff are on salary sacrifice for pension payments, but not salary sacrifice for anything else. So, for example, if a staff member is paid £3,000 per calendar month to pension, leaving £2,000 as a top line pay, can they claim back 80% on the £3,000 pre-sacrifice salary, or claim back 80% of the 2,000?
I feel like it's a higher math question for me. So that I kind of touched on that just a wee bit. So you'd claim it on the 2,000, so you'd claim it on after the salary sacrifice. Mm-hmm. You can claim it on before, but you would then need to but it would only be up to 2,500. So you couldn't get it on the full 3,000. It's limited to 2,500. And my understanding is you need to speak to your payroll, you need to speak to the pensions trust, but you would need specific agreement from your employee to pay it on the above, the pre-salary sacrifice. And I think my understanding is that you can make changes to salary sacrifices for life impacting situations, so death, getting married, coronavirus, I think it's now one of those life impacting situations, but you would want to specifically speak to your pension scheme and also your staff member before doing so.
Okay, thanks for that. In the next example, there's someone who started on the 6th of April. So is the 19th of March likely to be updated further down the line, the deadline? Might it be changed?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And the reason for this is that it was announced on the 20th of March. So they brought it to as close to that as possible to bridge that gap. If you've got a colleague who started on the 6th of April, they weren't on your payroll at that point and therefore they can't be furloughed. The counter argument is that, well, they were brought in on the 6th of April, so there was a job for them, and now 2 weeks later there doesn't appear to be, but no, they wouldn't be eligible. And I don't think, everything's changing. Everything changes on quite a daily basis, but I am 99% sure that it won't change beyond that date.
Okay, thanks for that. Just looking for a bit more clarity on if someone's furloughed and becomes sick. Does the employee have to be removed from furlough? And if so, what happens if this occurs within the 3-week minimum period for the scheme? Would the employer have to pay back the grant for the period?
You wouldn't have received the grant at that point because the person, I don't think, but if you have received it for that employee, I think you would have to pay it back. I'll maybe just double check that point and come back, and maybe SFHA can send that out as part
Yeah,
of
that'd be
the
great,
response
yeah.
to it. My understanding is that because someone is entitled to SSP from day one now in relation to if they get COVID-19, an employer would use part of that to top up the employee's salary so that they got their full pay. And your terms and conditions might be different, but the majority of employers use the SSP and then top it up with their own money, give the employee their salary for a certain period. And an employer cannot claim from the grant and can't claim SSP at the same time. Therefore, you can't be sick and on furlough. And I suppose the other situation with that is if someone is on furlough, they are brought back to work straight away, so that after the 3-week period or after a certain period, they can be informed that they need to come back to work. If an employee is sick, then they can't be told that. They can't be said, we need to come back to work on Monday because they're sick. So in my mind, trying to work through this, you can't be then sick and on furlough, but I'll look into that and maybe come back to Alan or Karen on that.
Much appreciated, Marianne. Does furlough cover full employer pension contributions if on a final salary scheme, for example?
No, I don't think it does. I think it goes up to the maximum employer contribution under auto-enrollment. I'm sorry, I forgot the phrase. I think that's all it's limited to.
Okay, thanks for that. If you have casual workers on low contracted hours who qualify for furlough, would you furlough them at the average actual hours over the year, or would it be based on the contract hours?
I think you would need to do it on their average, because that it's a tricky one. Now the pay reference period is for the previous 52 weeks, so you would probably be doing it on the average if they are regularly working beyond their contracted hours.
Okay, thanks for that. In the next example, they have an apprentice that they receive 50% public funding for. Can they claim for the 50% they fund?
No, and my reason for saying no, although it does feel wrong, is that if you have funding in place for someone's role, you have received that funding and therefore that role can be carried out. Now, I think you would probably want to speak to whoever has given the public funding to say, to explain the circumstances. If they are then in agreement that whilst although you have received the public funding, you need to furlough them because there's not the requirement for them to do the work just now, then I don't think you could claim it on the 50%. I think you could claim it on 30% because it would be 80% of their salary. So that's something that I can't give full advice on the basis of that information, I'm afraid. But if it's something that you have and you want me to specifically look at, then get in touch with me. But you would need agreement from the body that's given the public funding, and I think it would be up to the top, the 80%. So you couldn't then claim for someone's full salary because that's beyond what you would be getting, I think. Okay. But I would need to look at it in more detail.
Okay, thanks for that. Would staff that usually provide a service under a local council block grant be considered as publicly funded?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would think so. Yeah. If it's not that, I can't quite think what else it might be. But I would, again, you would need to look at the specifics. If you've got someone who's received a grant for, to pay them, if you're then, the thing about it is that you can't be profiteering, so you can't be sitting with money that you've received as a grant for someone's role and then also claim for the government for someone's role, because you're then sitting with more money for a role that is required. We would want to look at saying we either pause the funding for this person's role if we receive it, say, on a monthly basis, and we will take steps because they're on our payroll to furlough them and claim the grant. I don't think you could double into that.
Okay, thanks for that. And lastly, we've got just a follow-up point about one of the earlier questions. It was just about the date of employment as opposed to the RTI date. It was just to say that the RTI wasn't lodged late. It was not due to be in until the following week, and it was the correct time to add a new employee.
That then seems entirely unfair, and it's something that I would be appealing and really making noise about with HMRC, get on Twitter, get complaining about it to other bodies. But that seems wholly unfair. And if that was going to be a requirement, then the Treasury should have made that known to employers so as to ensure that they were able to claim for that individual.
Well, great, thanks for that. Well, unless there's any other questions, all it means for me to say is to thank you all for being a part of the webinar, and a huge thanks to Marianne. The slides and a recording of the webinar will be available on the SFHA website, and a briefing from SFHA will also be available shortly. And just to finally say again, thanks very much for participating, and please get in touch if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.